It used to be that a lot of parts of Brooklyn were all Italian neighborhoods. Like you grow up, you know everybody on your block, and then
if your last name had Mick in it, you were taking your life in your hands.
Well, there's some bad parts to that as well, right? But there's also like I feel like we've lost that sense of community.
Are you guys good? Set up? What are your names?
I'm James.
James?
Nick.
James and Nick. And you're saying you're visiting here, Texas?
Visiting, yeah. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. And James, where are you from?
I'm from Rhinebeck, New York. We're the only two conservative New Yorkers.
Are you really?
We're the only two.
No, where are you? You're from Brooklyn, you said?
Brooklyn, yeah, my whole life.
I actually find that as you get out into the boroughs, a lot of the working class areas, particularly like Long Island, it's often surprising how right-leaning a lot of them are.
No, there's a conservative group of people in Long Island, I'd say, and then some parts of Brooklyn where I'm from. But when you get into Manhattan, very rare, I would say, to see.
That's true.
And you definitely can't talk about certain ways that you feel about things, but...
Now, first off, let me ask you, so you're from Brooklyn, we were talking earlier, you said Italian-American?
Italian-American.
Italian-American. And then, I could guess by the beard, for crying out loud. I'm willing to bet at some point too, maybe in your 40s, probably you're back, just so you know. That's.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's starting a little bit.
It's called Father Time, and it's coming for you. And you're, you said Greek.
Yeah, I'm Greek. I got olive oil in the blood.
Yeah, you got olive oil. Yeah. Well, you both do. So, all right. So you said you're more conservative. So my question to you today is 4th of July. Sounds like your plans are you've been traveling, right? You said you were for a friend's wedding in Florida, kind of traveling across the South. The question we're just asking people is, are you proud to be an American?
Yeah, proud to be an American. We were just talking about how we feel like a lot of people don't really reflect on 4th of July as much anymore. At least we don't. But as I was thinking about this before we came over, it just got me thinking about how the 4th of July is all about freedom and how I'm kind of concerned that the government is putting more and more restrictions on our lives. Like the Roe v. Wade thing that just came out. We don't have to talk about whether you're pro or anti that, but just that I think the answer to a lot of these problems is not the government. It's not bigger government. It's within the values that we ourselves hold.
Right.
And I think the government is trying to force their values upon us.
Yeah, I think that happens sometimes. I would, with Roe v. Wade, I find it ironic. It's one of the few areas where the Supreme Court said we're actually removing our power and giving it to the states.
Yeah.
We're not going to regulate from the bench. States can do whatever they want. I think a lot of people don't really know that. They think it's like a ban. It's like, no, you can go as extreme as you want in California, Colorado. We're just not going to step in at all. It's not a federal government issue. What about you? Proud to be an American?
100%. I was talking to your buddy over there before, and a big thing that I wanted to bring up is, and I've had the privilege to go to other countries before, and I feel like a big part of really appreciating America is going to other countries, experiencing them, and then coming back and really, you get that home feel, right? Like this is my home and things like that. And I've never lived anywhere for an extra long period of time, so maybe my opinion would change based upon that.
Where have you visited?
I visited Japan before, and I love Japan. Japan's like one of my favorite countries to ever go to. And it's just it's really like a different world there. It's hard for me to put into words because you just kind of experience more of their culture. Whereas America, we're like a melting pot of all these different cultures, which is its own beautiful thing, but it's different, right? So you have a little bit of a loss of, I feel you have a loss of that like group mindset, right? Like we were saying before, like I'm a Brooklyn Italian. It used to be that a lot of parts of Brooklyn were all Italian neighborhoods. Like you grow up, you know everybody on your block, and then
if your last name had Mick in it, you were taking your life in your hands.
Well, there's some bad parts to that as well, right? But there's also like I feel like we've lost that sense of community that I have seen in other countries where they've had that community. But at the same time, we've opened up our country, right, to all these great people from all different places around the world, and we've built kind of a newer community, and I think that's something that is really unique to America. And everybody, like he was saying before, where you kind of take these holidays that we have for granted, like people like their day off from school or work and things like that, but they really mean something. So when you have this time off, it is something that you should reflect on and think about all the people who've died to kind of get us to where we are right now.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up, Japan, because a lot of times that Japan comes up when they talk about gun control. Talk about Japan, they don't allow you to have firearms. But again, you're talking about a country that really it's based on imperialism, right? And it's based on submitting to that, so submitting to a ruling class. And it is very homogenous, like you've discussed. Some of the laws there are what Americans would certainly consider incredibly racist, like even if you look at some of the tenant laws. And here in the
we were talking about that.
Yeah. If you look into moving there, you probably saw it. Oh, this might be a little bit tough. They go, no, have too much of beard, But you're Italian American and you're Greek American.
Yeah, that's right.
And you probably wouldn't find as many super tightly knit Italian and Greeks in Italy or Greece.
Yeah,
they're a little more.
Yeah, well, even within Italians themselves, right? There's always been that North and South kind of few they make fun of in shows like The Sopranos and
Sicily, the Moors. We've all seen True Romance.
I'm actually half Sicilian, so
are you okay?
Yeah, so it's a little. All
right.
but definitely, I agree.
So you're proud to be an American. Would you say? And like you said, I think people confuse that question with "Is America perfect?" That's not the question.
No.
But do you think that would you still consider? And I agree with you. Concerns about some of the directions we're heading in the United States, but would you still say it's the greatest country in the world?
Yeah, based on the other countries I've been to, definitely. Like I've been to France and to Iceland. Not that those are bad countries, but I definitely feel the freest here. And yeah, we went to a gun range the other day. It was really cool. We actually met this kid from England who was really nice, but he was shooting a gun. He had no idea what he was doing because you can't shoot guns over there.
Right.
So
it
was.
Well, it's very
makes you appreciate these things.
Technically, you can, but not in the way that we have it here for self-defense.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you saw. I was raised in Canada. We were talking about that earlier, and our prime minister just said, Canadians, unlike Americans, they understand that you do not have the right to firearm for self-defense. So he said, you don't have the right to defend yourself.
Wow.
And look, there's good and there's bad, right, of people being allowed to have firearms, but it does depend on your perspective. Do you believe that we have the right to defend ourselves with firearms, and there's responsibilities that come with that, or would we rather have a prime minister say, no, you don't?
Well, I think in regards to that, I think a lot of people feel it's like, oh, that will never happen. Like, you never will have to use that for self-defense. And I think maybe they're right, but the point is that it's a possibility.
Right.
And I think to remain a free country, we should still have that right. Obviously, you can go down a whole rabbit hole of background checks and things. Obviously, certain things should be into place, and people have mixed feelings on that. But that being said, at the end of the day, true freedom is the freedom to both protect yourself and express yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we were driving through on our trip from Florida. We were driving through Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, in the woods. And we just kind of noticed how arrogant it is for some people from these big cities to talk about oh, we don't need an AK-47. You don't even know what you're talking about.
Right.
You've never been to a place like this where you're 100 miles from civilization. It's
yeah, you need to call a cop. Nobody's coming.
You
the banjo from Deliverance.
We need the government to take a step back, and just people need to be able to govern themselves a little bit more.
Yeah, or certainly people living in Alaska, or a good example is, I don't know if you're familiar with Wyoming. They have a bear problem. They have a brown bear problem, which they didn't really have before. There's a hilarious video that I've shown where there's a grizzly bear at a Dairy Queen, a drive-through, just going through nuts.
Wow.
And a big reason is they're not allowed to hunt them. But that's also a federal thing where they step in and they're going, look, we have a problem here. We need to hunt them. So I said, well, you can. Yeah. There's $200,000 for every tag to hunt them. So who gets to do it? The ultra wealthy. And so it ends up being more of a problem. They're not endangered. They're encroaching. They become comfortable with humans. And so someone in New York may not understand why someone in rural Wyoming needs something pretty damn powerful. And by the way, it's also bullcrap. They're not trying to ban hunting calibers that are far bigger and more dangerous. If you're from New York, I'm guessing you probably haven't had a ton of experience with guns.
No, but the laws are weird, right? So New York City, he's upstate New York.
Yeah, upstate, a little bit different. Yeah.
New York City, the laws are weird where it's super, super, super strict in New York City, which makes sense, whatever, it's a city. But in Long Island, you could just go and buy a shotgun rifle. Right. Versus, and I mean, you gotta live there, you gotta have your license, you gotta prove you live there. There is somewhat of background checks and things like that, but it's way different from New York City where you gotta go fingerprinting and.
And handguns are basically.
Oh, handguns.
I mean, now it's gonna change because we just saw that.
Yeah,
exactly. In New York City, you have to basically go through.
Well, I have a friend who I think he waited 4 or 5 years to even get his handgun. And like I said, I'm 25, so he started 21 or 20.
Okay, took him a long time.
Yeah.
And then
and he just got it 2 weeks ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So to carry a handgun or just to own a handgun?
I think just to own one. Oh, you can't carry it. Forget about it. You can't.
Well, that'll change now with the Supreme Court rule.
Yeah,
because the Supreme Court said you can't do that. You can't tell people that they can't own.
But I mean, just buying one, getting your license, that whole aspect of it.
Yeah, no, I know. I have friends who live in New York, and it's very different. Let me ask you this. It's interesting that you mentioned you've been to France, you've been to Denmark.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised.
Yeah, Iceland that time.
Oh, Iceland. Sorry. Yeah. There was a previous gentleman who said he wanted to move to Denmark. It's funny because we've had people say that those countries are better, and that Denmark, Iceland, often the Nordic countries, which I don't know if you know this, not a lot of people who look like you there. It's pretty homogenous. I'm sure you notice when you're in Iceland. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
By that I mean
all white, blue eyes, blonde hair.
Yeah.
That's it.
You could use it to white balance the cameras right here. And they don't have the same. What did you mean when you said that you didn't feel as free? Because I know what it was when I lived in Canada.
Iceland, it's a little more difficult to describe, but France, I was there for a study away in college, and it just seemed like the police were not there to protect us. it seemed like they were there to make sure a mass terrorist attack did not happen. It was like these military police walking around in groups of like 10 with machine guns.
Right.
I would like walk down the street, there'd be like a burned out motorcycle.
Right.
It just seemed a little like a different vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little more wild over there.
I think I've also even heard you say in one of your videos that you can't compare, like, how you can compare Sweden to, like, the Bronx.
Right. Or certainly how you're going to compare, Denmark to the United States. It'd be more apt to compare it to Rhode Island, and that's not a joke.
No, seriously, yeah.
Yeah.
We're so, and that's part of the reason, too, why we're visiting and stuff, too, because it's like, our country's so huge, and you kind of forget that, because everybody on a micro scale, you're in your own life, right?
I know.
And you kind of only see what's around you. So going back to what he said about us driving, you see like these houses kind of in the middle of nowhere, right? Where somebody who's worried about protection for themselves in the middle of nowhere is completely different from somebody who's worried about protection. It's like my house is attached to the person next to me,
Right.
And it's like you're at least in some sort of neighborhood community type aspect where if somebody sees something, they might say something. If you're in the middle of nowhere, you got animals, you saying like bears and stuff coming. It's like
it's really made me appreciate the layout of the United States, I think, our trip, because as we're driving, it just seems so arbitrary. Like, oh, we're in Alabama now, or in Mississippi, and it's like 2 miles later. Like, what's the difference? But you really do need these states where they have different laws because there's different needs.
Yeah.
You can say that in school, but until you really visit,
Yeah.
you can see that it's the truth.
Different lifestyles.
You know what's interesting, Ishra? I hate to ask you guys to move in close. I know, I know the whole rivalry, Italian-Greeks, but it's hard for me to get the microphone going. No, but no, you're absolutely right. That's why each state is sort of its own petri dish. You know, I mean, they need to have, unless it's enumerated, they need to have their own powers. And this is something that doesn't really exist outside the United States. But what's interesting to me is you said, okay, you studied abroad, in France, Iceland, you've traveled quite a bit. And I wonder if a big differentiating factor is that you've probably maybe experienced more of the United States, because a lot of people your age, they go, I traveled abroad and I just liked it so much more than America. Why do you think that is?
I think it's a romanticized view of things. I don't think they really sit there and look at the policies of the country they're living in. Maybe they're thinking about what feels good now, not what feels good in 20 years. Like, what feels good in 20 years is going to be, I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but...
No, I think...
the governments have a lot more control over people's lives over there, that's what I'm trying to say.
I agree with the romanticization of that whole aspect of going abroad to other countries, right? You get people with cool accents. And the thing, too, is like the land is so beautiful in all these other places. And you're not really... To that respect, though, you're not thinking about actually living there. You kind of just, you have this imagery of you go and you see like these beautiful waterfalls and mountainscapes, but what's it like to raise a family there, take care of if you have cattle, and then like, you know what I mean? It's a whole, how are you going to interact with your neighbors? Do they like you? Are they going to have, what's going to happen if you have a problem with them? Like that's all part of real world life. Like, if you have kids, where are they going to go to school? And think, like, you're not thinking about that. You're thinking, I'm gonna go have like daiquiris and drinks and hang out at the beach, and it's like, that's not a life. That's maybe like 2 weeks out of your life.
And by the way, the American lesbians that go over there to the island of Lesbos, they're in for a rude awakening. They're not necessarily welcomed with open arms.
Oh, really?
I
wouldn't even know.
Better looking over there. It's not the same people who shop for their shirts at Bass Pro. I think the way I would summarize it is, and being raised in Montreal, which is very European. I don't know if you've ever been. I mean, if you're in New York, you probably should go visit Montreal. If ever you're like, I want to get my European fix without, paying for a ticket, you can go visit Montreal. It's far more like Europe than it would be like New York. Old, beautiful cathedrals, churches, right, historical buildings. I think when people visit a lot of these countries, like you said, they're looking at it through rose-colored glasses. They're going to experience, and this is true, the beautiful things that were in the history. But America is, at least as an idea, trying to be a place of the beautiful place that is. I think maybe that's kind of what you're saying. Not only in 20 years, but okay, today, now, what is it? Not what did they do centuries ago? Because it's very different. I mean, something that you even talk about, look, the Roman Empire. It's not the same as Italy today. It would be a silly thing to act like it is. It doesn't mean they don't have beautiful things to offer, but in its totality.
Historical, like, artifacts and things like that. Exactly. But it's a different world that we live in.
So let me ask you this. What is it that you love most about America and living? This is kind of a feel-good thing for people to, not want to swallow a sword with all the negativity in media. What do you love most about the United States of America? Liz, my cousin Vinny, I'll start with you.
Oh, man. I want to say something that's like really unique too, but it's because everybody's gonna say I love where I'm from. I feel like it's hard to find somebody that really hates where they're from because it's their home. But I mean, like I said,
I was born in Detroit and then raised in Montreal.
That's where
I couldn't get out quickly enough.
Yeah, honestly, like, and then maybe this would be my only personal experience in America, but I love the familial raising of how they say it takes a village to raise a child, right? And I've truly experienced that with all my family, and it's something that, in my experience in the United States, is I don't know, I hope it's not unique, but I love the fact that everything is, from my life, has been family oriented, people supporting me my whole life, and have given me the freedom to choose whatever I wanted to do and go with my life and what I wanted to do in my career. And I feel like in other countries where other people grow up, maybe they don't get that, where they say, oh, you have to be a doctor, you have to be a lawyer, you have to be whatever. Whereas I grew up in a family where we didn't come from money. My parents didn't go to college, really. Like, family's very poor. Grandparents come from Italy, but they always wanted the best for their children, and they made sacrifices to make sure that could happen. And at the end of the day, they just wanted me to be happy.
And then, of course, they yell about them.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea what I did so you could be a little
exactly.
shit?
Always hold that over you.
Oh, yeah, of course. No, but it's strong family units, and a lot of people overlook, Italian Americans. It's generational, right? You had Italian Americans coming, you had Irish Americans, you had Jewish Americans, and of course, not to mention the history of African Americans, and by the way, the African slave trade, which of course contributed to it. Italians, very, very strong family units and a very strong sense of community. I don't think you get a ton of that everywhere else in the United States. But that is something that for sure I think is a great part of the United States. And, like I'm talking about, Italian man, Greek, we think, in America we go, Italians and Greeks are very similar. Very, very different when you actually look at the history throughout Europe. Matter of fact, there's quite a bit of feuds if you look at through the history, and people get to be friends here. What's your favorite part about the United States?
Oh, favorite part?
Yeah, what's your favorite part?
The fact that we're not supposed to be able to be imprisoned for political dissent, disagreeing with people. I think that when today in the era of the rise of censorship, people assume that their party is always going to be the one that is making those rules.
Right.
I think that is very, very flawed.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous idea. I like the idea that we aren't forced to exist for like our ethnic group or for the government. We can exist to serve ourselves, our families, our friends if we want, and create the life that we want to, and take. We have a lot of opportunities that we can just take, to do those things. We aren't prevented from doing that.
Well, I think actually, as if you look at Greek history, it's a perfect example of that, because people here, professors go, look at these Greek philosophers, and sure, that's absolutely right, but also look at the fates of some of those philosophers. Look at the persecution that some of them experienced as well. So a lot of these people, once they started thinking outside the box too much, they didn't have the First Amendment that we have here. This is the first country to really do it that way. People kind of tried to. We don't have it in Canada. It's not just political dissent. We have a good friend who was actually put before a tribunal and went to the Supreme Court for a joke, a stand-up comedy joke. And it wasn't even racial. It wasn't even about women. It was about a kid who did a Make-A-Wish Foundation on the Canadian version of American Idol and sucked at singing. It was brutal, but it was funny. And we experienced that in Canada. And that is something I think that coming from abroad I really experienced. Final question. We've spoken with a lot of people today. And what's interesting to me is the people who hesitated and said, oh, well, I don't know if I'm proud to be American. I'm trying to go through my memory bank. Yeah. All upper middle class white people. And a lot of them would answer because of racism. But all of the black people who we spoke with, including people who are homeless or were homeless, said, I'm absolutely proud to be American. It's the greatest country in the world. And that, by the way, not too dissimilar from Italian Americans. If you look at history and Italian Americans, how they were sort of persecuted and viewed and marginalized. Why do you think there's that divide? I do find it pretty interesting that a lot of the American white liberals who speak for the marginalized don't actually listen to what they're saying.
So that, honestly, everything comes down to marketing, I think, right? And a lot of the times it's what everyone's being shown for the most part.
I'm not surprised an Italian would say that. You guys always present it like, hey, look, this is what you got to do. You tell them, you don't tell them this part, but no, you're right.
It's pretty much like that, like even, I don't want to say anything. When it comes down to say even the COVID vaccines, right? For example, I'm a proponent of vaccination. I'm not anything again, right?
Of course.
But the way
you're not Jenny McCarthy.
The way stuff was handled, it almost was kind of like the mafia in a little bit, where it's like you either get the vaccine or you're gonna lose your job. But no one, we're not gonna make you lose your job. That's their freedom to do that.
The Teamsters couldn't imagine. Wait, bullshit! You're gonna force them to take an injection? We can't do that. Come on, we have limitations.
But not to get off topic, point being, I think a lot of it is everything that's shown to you. So if you don't, it's almost like the difference between reading a book and actually living life, right? You could read about something and you could be a huge like a college professor, for example. I went to school originally for mechanical engineering, but I don't do that now. But even in there, a lot of it was all theory. It's all theorized, right? Whereas some professors, some of them had worked and then they retired and became professors, but some of them, they've been going to school their whole life, which is don't get me wrong, like they're in their specific topic, they're very well versed, right? In whatever you're talking, fluid dynamics or thermodynamics, whatever. But when it actually goes into practice of like what you're doing, a lot of times real world stuff happens, right? Where you
the reason I'm laughing is because you were talking exactly like a stereotypical Italian with your hands, and you're standing like a statue of Plato. It's just, literally, it's like a Greek statue, Italian. That's what I'm worried if you're like a mechanical engineer. I don't want you building our planes. You're like, this ball bearing shit. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, well, that's because we had, we had Mickey over there doing it, and he broke the engine. That's why flight 46 went down.
It's that real world experience, man, that you can't read about. You can't there's obviously proponents of news. You got to know what's going on in the world, but like I said before, like macro and micro, it's like you got to look at things into perspective, and to really get a feel of the world around you, it's really on that micro scale, and you got to do your part, and there's only so much.
I think for first-hand experience, why do you think it is that there's that divide? And I'm sure you experience it there, even in upstate New York. Upper middle class, primarily Caucasian liberals saying, well, this is what happens to the marginalized community, and then they say, well, it's actually not our issue.
I just think people as a whole have a tendency to be discontent with where they are, especially in places that are good. They always want to believe something's better. The grass is always greener. Like, that's not my idea. I think that's human nature.
Right.
And unless your value system lends itself to being appreciative of what you have and really looking at that and comparing it to what you could be in, like you could be in China, where if you go outside of your apartment building, you're in prison for 20 years because of the COVID lockdown. You could be in Canada, where you can't even cross the border because you're not vaccinated. It's like,
we had a guy today.
I don't know how anybody could be unappreciative of America. We definitely have our flaws, but it's the best country in the world.
We literally had a guy today who, again, sort of on the other side of the aisle, was saying, I went to China, and of course, I don't like the government, but really it's just great. I recommend you go. The culture is great. I'm like, wait, hold on a second. If the government can arrest you, that is the primary driver of their culture right now. You can't. And then, what do you mean? You just think it's beautiful because you like the food? Like, have you seen what happens with the Uyghurs? Like, we sort of with other countries pick and choose and go, oh, there's this beautiful aspect of this Chinese culture. There's this horrible aspect of American culture. And you go, yeah, but most of Chinese culture today is horrible. It's a gross abuse of human rights, and I think it's being like a cafeteria sort of liberal in a way, where it's like
you can choose what you want.
And they pick the best of other countries and the worst of America, and that's what we've noticed here today. It's been. It's been actually really uplifting to see that a lot of people are like, no, it's flawed, but it's still the greatest country in the world.
So like, we could be Australia. I used to want to go to Australia, but now I'd rather not be in a prison camp, so I stay here.
Exactly. Isn't it funny? That's how they started, as a penal colony, and now they're going back to it. So everything old is new again. Shackles are the new black in Australia. All right, thanks, guys. I know it's hot out here, so I appreciate you guys taking the time. Oh, man, I really appreciate it. And let me know if you go there and do those wings. Hey, if you like this video, hit that notification bell up there. Or subscribe, or share this, right? Isn't that right, Dave?
Smash that like button and share it.
What are you wearing there? That's nice.
Oh, this is, I found it in the trash.
Yeah, also known as?
Your shirt.
Crowdershop.com, which is where you can go and support, and we keep the overstock in the trash.
It's for people who are little.
Yeah.
He says I haven't earned it yet because I ain't grown all the way.
By the way, if you find Hunter Biden's gun in there, just let it be.